Welcome to the Vatican, where history meets mystery, and there are a few things that might send shivers down your spine. From hidden treasures to bizarre relics, the Vatican is not just a religious center, but also a place filled with secrets that could make even Indiana Jones nervous. Get your magnifying glass and courage ready because you're about to uncover the 20 strangest things hidden in the Vatican. If any of these really intrigue you, leave a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to comment a 0 and share your thoughts. Enjoy the video and don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel. Number 20. The Vatican Secret Archives. Given the significance of the Vatican, it makes sense that there are secret locations reserved only for cardinals or even just for the Pope himself. That's why we have this very real and much speculated room, known as the Vatican Secret Archives. To be clear, this place is actually called the Secret Archives, when looking at its Latin version. However, considering its different meanings, one of them suggests it's more of a private archive, and that's where the real truth lies. We can prove this because modern people have come here to read some of the documents in the books, texts, and letters contained within. And if you're curious, the reason this place is so secretive is that everything inside it relates to the Pope and the Vatican throughout all of history. In fact, that's true because it houses documents dating back to the medieval era. This is not just a treasure trove, it's more like an epic, chronicling the historical journey through each generation of the Catholic Church and the leaders who have held power over the centuries. Scholars who have been allowed access to the Vatican Secret Archives have been amazed by the details and insights into historical events, from the fall of the Roman Empire to the rise of Christianity, and much more, all contained within kilometers of bookshelves. However, it must be acknowledged that there are still areas that are currently closed off to the public. But that doesn't mean they contain truly dark documents that the world isn't meant to know. It simply means they are either not accessible yet, or the documents are too damaged to be read. Sadly, this has happened to many materials in these archives. But nonetheless, it remains a place that holds vibrant history. And the only truly frightening thing is that it could be even more frightening than we think. But strangely, it's not like that at all. Number 19. The Vatican Necropolis. When you think of a necropolis, you might picture the massive cemeteries in Egypt, where tombs containing dozens of people, often family members, are buried together in one area so they can enter the afterlife together. And when you hear the phrase Vatican Necropolis, you might expect something similar, but for those living in the Holy City, right? Not exactly. This is what actually makes it so strange. This necropolis wasn't actually built by the Church. Rather, it's a result of ancient Roman laws and the expansion of the Vatican. The Vatican Necropolis lies beneath Vatican City, at a depth of 5 to 12 meters under St. Peter's Basilica. This is significant because in the 1940s, the Vatican conducted excavations in this area and discovered the remains of a necropolis. But how did it end up there if the Vatican didn't approve it? Because it was built during ancient Roman times. Back then, it was actually illegal to bury the dead within the city. These people, however, became clever and used the roads near the city to bury their loved ones. One of these roads passed through what would later become the Vatican Hill. And you can probably guess what happened next. Fast forward to later times, Emperor Constantine wanted to build St. Peter's Basilica on his tomb. This meant that part of the necropolis had to be buried, even though it was protected by law at the time. and so it was buried and only rediscovered in the 1940s. This shows that when history is involved, nothing is truly sacred. And sometimes you never know what's buried beneath your feet until you dig it up yourself and see it. Number 18. The escape route. In reality, this isn't the scariest thing on the list, but it certainly stands out as one of the most significant features of the Vatican. Specifically, the Vatican has a complete secret escape route. For whom, you might ask? Of course, it's for the Pope. Do you really think there wouldn't be an emergency escape route for him in case of an invasion? In fact, there have been several instances in history when this situation actually occurred. For example, in 1494, when France invaded Italy, the Pope had to use the secret escape route to avoid danger. Then, in 1527, when Rome was attacked and the Holy Roman Army stormed the Vatican, killing many of the Pope's guards, he was still able to escape thanks to this secret passage. How long is this passage? It's about 800 meters long, which doesn't sound like much. But when you're running for your life, you'd be willing to do anything to reach safety. Is this escape route still usable today? The answer is yes, but also maybe no. Technically, the escape route is still open, but it's no longer as it once was. In fact, this entire area has become a tourist attraction where people can actually visit. Nowadays, you can walk through the very passage where past popes had to flee just to see how long this escape route really is. And the question is there another secret escape route for the Pope? If something were to happen today, it's likely that there is. The only difference is it wouldn't be as publicly known as this one. After all, you wouldn't want all your potential enemies to know the ins and outs of an area that's about to be attacked, right? This is the clearest proof of what the Vatican is willing to do to protect its highest member. Number 17. The haunted. Now let's get back to the strange things. And depending on your beliefs, you might feel that possession is a real danger, possibly caused by ghosts, spirits, or demons from different cultures. Hollywood never stops making stories about possession based on real events, making viewers wonder if it's actually happening. Naturally, the Pope and the Catholic Church in general are strong believers in possession and have performed thousands of exorcisms over the years. According to them, this includes many exorcisms carried out by a particular man who was once the right-hand man of a former pope. The Vatican performing exorcism rituals isn't inherently strange, as they firmly believe in possession and in helping to rid victims of evil forces. However, sometimes they have resorted to extreme measures in an attempt to cleanse the soul, even going as far as clearly stating when and where exorcisms should take place. This is really dangerous for many reasons, not the least of which is because a 90-page document explaining the Vatican's reasoning behind this isn't the strictest set of rules, and there are issues that should be clear but still need to be documented. For example, one part of the document mentions that possession could sometimes just be a simple illness, and therefore an exorcism should only take place after the victim has suffered significant harm and experts have been consulted. If you didn't know, there have been many Catholic priests who have taken advantage of exorcism rites to do terrible things to victims, many of whom were women. And that's what's truly strange here. Number 16. The Vatican Art Collection. When thinking of the Vatican, people often imagine holiness, solemn religious ceremonies, and, of course, art, a key part of the identity of this land. Art at the Vatican is not only a heritage of the past, but also a bridge between religion and the modern world. It was a pope who initiated the creation of the modern art collection, believing that the Church should not separate itself from contemporary culture, but should accompany and understand humanity through shared values, with art being the most refined language of expression. It might be surprising that a religious symbol would take such a keen interest in modern art, a field that is often personal, free-spirited, and sometimes a critique of society. Yet this is exactly what shows the Vatican's open and profound perspective. Art is not just beauty, but also a journey to find meaning, something that both religion and art have always shared. Today, the Vatican's modern art collection has grown to about 8,000 works from famous names like Van Gogh, Picasso, Chagall, and contemporary Italian artists. It's not just a place to display art, but also a statement that faith and creativity can coexist and enrich each other. However, art, while important, is still just a part of the mysterious veil of the Vatican. It also houses many religious relics considered sacred, ancient artifacts that blend both mythology and history. It's this fusion of artistic brilliance and spiritual mystery that makes the Vatican not only a religious center, but also an appealing destination for those passionate about culture, history, and timeless beauty. Number 15, the Vatican's finances. We'll now shift to a completely different topic, one that really makes many people uneasy: finances. If I asked you about your current financial situation, you'd probably be able to list all the details about your income and how you spend, right? Everyone has bills to pay, right? But how do you think the Vatican manages its finances? The answer isn't simple. Part of the reason for this is by design, because like many organizations in today's world, the Vatican does not disclose its finances, even though it probably should. One thing we can be sure of is that Vatican City is a sovereign state, meaning it's actually a country with around 1,000 people. This means that the Vatican manages its own economy and makes money from it. But that's not all. The Vatican also takes that money and invests it in businesses around the world, including some private companies. This doesn't even include the donations they receive from the faithful, which makes their lack of transparency about the actual amount of money they receive even more strange, especially after a major scandal involving a bank in the city. Number 14. The Crusades. Now, we'll dive into a darker aspect of the Vatican and the Pope, as the Crusades have been labeled as holy wars. And since Catholicism was the dominant religion of the leaders of the Crusades, this means that the Pope allowed them many times, right? The answer is yes. In fact, this is absolutely true. For example, in the First Crusade, when 70,000 Muslims were killed in the name of converting others to Christianity, it was the Pope who oversaw the war and even blessed some individuals involved in the battles afterward so they wouldn't be judged for their sins. Yes, that's right. The Pope essentially told certain warriors that they could act freely, and everything would be fine in the afterlife. And that's when he allowed them to commit the atrocities they deemed necessary in the name of the Holy Trinity. This isn't exactly in line with how forgiveness and atonement should have been carried out. Just a thought. World War I and World War II showed two very different sides of the Vatican. In World War I, they did everything they could to bring peace to Europe, even selling valuable items from the church to help those in need. However, in World War II, the situation became quite ambiguous, with the Pope at the time signing agreements with the Third Reich while refusing to condemn many of their actions, leading to Pope Pius being referred to as the Pope of Hitler. This is truly terrifying and absolutely not acceptable. Number 13. The Knights Templar. Now, I just mentioned the Crusades, but I'm going to talk about one of the important groups from that time who had a significant influence on later history. That is the Knights Templar. To avoid any confusion, the Knights Templar were a French military group, deeply devout in their Catholic faith, and initially they didn't fight in wars. In fact, they were established to help pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. Eventually, they were blessed by the Catholic Church and the Pope himself. And that's when they became one of the world's wealthiest and best-trained fighting groups, even leading many crusades. Ironically, they were later disbanded by the King of France because the king no longer trusted them, although to this day there are many rumors that they still exist. Number 12. The Shroud of Turin. This can be said to be one of the most controversial items on this list. No doubt about it. The Shroud of Turin is a religious artifact that is believed to be the cloth that Jesus wrapped around himself after being crucified and placed in the tomb. This is what makes it special, but not necessarily a sacred relic in the literal sense, except that this cloth is believed to have the image of Jesus' face imprinted on it at the time. And that makes it an incredibly important relic if it is indeed real. This is something that no one, not even the Catholic Church, can be 100% sure about. Many people believe in the shroud, and some even worship it, seeing it as the sacred face of Jesus. However, others point out that between the time the cloth was discovered, many years after Jesus was believed to have resurrected, and the time it was actually tested with modern science, some details don't quite match up. Clearly, it cannot be 100% proven that this is the cloth that covered Jesus' face, and that's what makes it such a controversial topic. Many people want to believe it is real, while others try to approach it objectively, and thus, the shroud continues to be a subject of debate. As for the Vatican, they have neither officially supported nor denied this, and that in itself speaks volumes. Number 11. The Spear of Destiny. I'll continue with the death of Jesus a bit more, because there's another relic from his crucifixion that stands out in the minds of both religious followers and popular culture. The Spear of Destiny is not some magical spear created by anyone. It is the spear that pierced Jesus' side while he was being crucified. Therefore, it is a significant part of this event, as it was the weapon that ended Jesus' life. As a result, many believe that possessing the Spear of Destiny not only brings immense power, but also the ability to win any battle they choose. This is related to the Vatican in many ways, as such a sacred spear was used by the Crusaders to help them win an important battle. The spear has also been featured in many pop culture works, including Constantine and Hellboy. Scarily, there are currently 4 spears of destiny believed to exist in the world, and one of them is actually in Rome, near the Vatican. Number 10. The Apparitions of St. Peter. When it comes to the Vatican, it's impossible not to mention the mysterious and eerie stories surrounding this place. Among them, the story of the apparitions of St. Peter, one of Christ's first disciples, is perhaps the most prominent. According to legend, once, St. Peter witnessed a strange apparition, resembling himself, shortly after his death. This image made such a deep impression that a series of paintings depicting the event were created, displayed throughout the Vatican as part of its historical heritage. To this day, 11 of these paintings still exist, and some believe that the ghost of St. Peter quietly walks through the ancient walls of the Vatican, bringing to life a piece of the legend still told through generations. Number 9. The Giuseppe Momo Spiral Staircase. The Giuseppe Momo Spiral Staircase is one of the unique structures of the Vatican, and it certainly deserves the title strange in every sense. Built with a specific purpose in mind, this staircase is located in a discrete area reserved for a select few. One of the users of this staircase was the Pope, who requested such a design for the convenience of moving without the exertion of constantly climbing and descending stairs, as he didn't want to have to perform these steps repeatedly. Interestingly, even the Pope can sometimes feel lazy. Today, you can visit a modern version of this staircase through special tours, but of course, not in the carriage that the Pope once used. Number 8. The Lost Books. I mentioned the secret archives of the Vatican, but what about the lost books? This is actually more complicated than you might think. The lost books of the Bible and the forgotten books of Eden are a special collection of texts translated from other books, believed to be parts lost from the Bible or even chapters removed from what we know today as the Bible. It would make sense for the Vatican to have these books, as they are the center of Catholic faith. Therefore, they would want to keep all important texts related to their religion. The importance of these texts is debatable, but it can be said that the Vatican considers them important enough to be protected. Number 7. The Vatican Observatory. Science and the Church in general haven't always had the best relationship. However, for the Vatican, they hold an uncontroversial belief that science is very important. They've tried to emphasize this over the years, especially in scientific fields that they see as integral to their religion. Just like astronomy, this is the dome. After all, without knowing the position of celestial bodies, it's difficult to determine dates, and you might misunderstand what happened in the Bible. That's why the Vatican Observatory was built, as a complete astronomical tower to observe the stars, and many scientists are allowed to use it. An irony here is that over the years, many observatories have been built, including the latest one constructed outside of the Vatican. Number 6. The Corpse of the Dead in the Trial. Now, let's return to some of the more bizarre events in Vatican history. As you can see, while everything may seem stable and orderly in the religious hierarchy, the reality wasn't always so. Those who held the title of Pope sometimes did bizarre and frightening things to assert power and showcase the strength of the Holy Church. One of the most bizarre and shameful abuses of power was known as the Cadaver Synod, or Cadaver Trial, where the body of a recently deceased pope was brought before a court of his peers, including the successor pope, and was found guilty of various charges before being stripped of his papal title for eternity. Yes, this was a mock trial for a dead corpse. Such abuses of power seemed to be common at the time, especially among popes who had come to power through the methods of that era. Number 5. The Ark of the Covenant. The next one really falls into the conspiracy theory category, but the Ark of the Covenant is one of the most important religious artifacts of all time. Many people believe that the Vatican actually holds it within its walls. Why is this important? If you've read the Bible, the Ark of the Covenant is said to be the dwelling place of God in many aspects, and it was carried by the Israelites everywhere, guarded at all costs. Opening it without being pure, or even just touching it without permission, could lead to death. This is why, in the movie Indiana Jones, the face of the person who opens the Ark melts. It's believed to hold immense power, so it makes sense that an esteemed organization like the Vatican would possess it and keep it secret to prevent anyone from taking it from them. Number 4. The Miracle of Fatima. Now, we move on to a more bizarre topic, the kind that makes you wonder, did this really happen? Not all miracles or strange events take place at the Vatican. Sometimes they happen in Portugal, specifically in 1917 in Fatima. Portugal, a prophecy was heard that certain extraordinary events would occur that day, which could only be called a miracle. A large crowd gathered to see if it was true. According to many reports, the sun danced in the sky in a way that was scientifically impossible. The story gets even stranger when a Vatican bishop was sent to investigate, and he declared that these events were completely in line with Catholic faith and prophecy. Quite astonishing. Number 3. The Augustus of Prima. One thing that might surprise you on this list is the Augustus of Prima statue, a true masterpiece excavated in 1863 and believed to be a lost work of Emperor Caesar Augustus. What makes this statue special is that it's a brilliant blend of Greek and Roman artistic styles. The face of the statue clearly resembles Augustus, while the body's posture bears the characteristics of Greek heroes and ancient mythological figures. So, what's Vatican's connection to this artwork? In fact, the statue is currently displayed in one of the Vatican's museums, which not only honors Roman art, but also reflects their deep admiration for the historical and cultural heritage of the Roman Empire. Number 2, the Mars of Toad. I'll continue with an intriguing piece of art, the Mars of Toady, a life-sized bronze warrior statue dating back to the 5th or early 4th century BC. This statue was rediscovered in 1835, and after research, archaeologists realized it might have been part of a sanctuary dedicated to the war god of the Umbrian tribe. The Mars of Toady stands out with its exquisite details, and its excellent preservation to this day is a testament to the craftsmanship of artists from that era. As you might guess, like the Augustus statue, the Mars of Toady is currently on display at the Vatican Museum, where it continues to attract the attention of researchers and ancient art enthusiasts. Number 1. Vada leaks. Now we can't skip one final shock to highlight the strangeness, and at times, corruption within the Vatican. The Vada leaks scandal can be considered one of the biggest blows to the Vatican's reputation and to several popes over the years. In short, a massive amount of documents was leaked during internal conflicts within the Vatican. While some people within the organization were pushing for more transparency and alignment with modern social norms, others wanted to keep things secretive and continue with corrupt practices. The leaked documents were a bombshell, revealing, among other things, that some individuals paid for private meetings with the Pope. Even though the Vatican tried to stop the flow of information, the backlash was significant, and many people still feel the effects of this scandal to this day. After the death of Pope Francis, the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, the Catholic world entered a period of mourning and reflection on a papacy marked by significant reform, but also considerable controversy. Affectionately referred to by many believers as Santo Francesco, Pope Francis leaves behind a legacy of profound reforms, though not without its share of debates. In the context of the power transition at the Vatican, several sources indicate that the Holy See is quietly reviewing and handling sensitive documents that could impact the Church's image, as well as the reputation of Pope Francis himself. During his more than a decade-long papacy, Pope Francis became a symbol of a more open church, one closer to the poor and unafraid to challenge traditional boundaries. He was the first pope from Latin America and also the first to adopt the papal name of Saint Francis of Assisi, a symbol of humility and commitment to the marginalized. However, this very spirit of reform led to significant opposition from conservative factions within the clergy, who felt that many of his views went too far, threatening the doctrinal structure and long-standing traditions of the Church. One of the most controversial policies during Pope Francis's papacy was the relaxation of the Church's stance on the LGBT+ community. While the Church still officially does not recognize same-sex marriage, he allowed priests to bless same-sex couples in appropriate pastoral circumstances. This was seen as an unprecedented move, sparking intense debates within the Church. In some African and Eastern European countries, where the Church still holds strong conservative influence, these actions faced fierce opposition from local cardinals. Not only did Pope Francis address issues of gender and family, but he also stirred up theological circles with some statements about traditional doctrine. In an informal interview, he was quoted as saying that hell does not exist as a specific place, but rather as a state of separation from God, a view that many conservative theologians criticized as contrary to foundational teachings. The Vatican later sought to clarify this statement, but the controversy continues to smolder among scholars and religious media. Even in the realm of symbols and liturgy, Pope Francis was not afraid to break tradition. His acceptance of a crucifix, considered to have modern art elements, but was seen by many believers as sacrilegious due to its connections with non-Christian imagery, sparked a wave of backlash from the conservative community. Under his leadership, many traditional liturgical rituals were restricted, leading to disappointment among faithful who cherish the Latin Mass. Now, with the absence of Pope Francis, factions within the Church are quietly preparing for a reformation of the Vatican. The upcoming conclave, where hundreds of cardinals from around the world will gather to elect the new pope, will be the place where the deep divisions within the Church will be most evident. While the reformist faction hopes to find a successor who will continue the open and inclusive path initiated by Pope Francis, the conservative faction is anticipating a return to tradition with clearer doctrinal boundaries. The Vatican's review and cleanup of sensitive documents during the period of mourning is not only an administrative action, but also a sign of the political and religious sensitivity of the legacy left by Pope Francis. The control of information during this transitional phase is not just to protect the image of the late Pope, but also reflects an effort to manage the historical narrative of the Vatican before a new chapter is opened. Beneath the solemn and sacred exterior of the Vatican, the smallest country in the world but with a profound spiritual influence, lies a system that operates with great power, but is also shrouded in mystery and sometimes lacks transparency. For decades, the Vatican has been overshadowed by a series of scandals, ranging from financial issues to sexual abuse, from abuses of power to the concealment of information, severely damaging the global image of the Catholic Church. One of the greatest stains on the modern history of the Church is the sexual abuse of minors by clergy, systematically covered up for many years by the leadership within the Holy See. Independent investigations in the U.S., Australia, Ireland, Germany, and France have brought thousands of cases to light, with hundreds of priests accused, while the Vatican has often been criticized for being too slow and lacking transparency in handling them. Although Pope Francis has taken more progressive steps, such as allowing public reports and internal disciplinary actions, many victims still believe that the Vatican has not truly taken responsibility. Alongside the ethical scandals, financial issues and corruption have been major problems, particularly related to the Vatican Bank, also known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, IOR. As early as the 1980s, the mysterious death of Archbishop Paul Marcinkus and the bankruptcy of Banco Ambrosiano, in which the Vatican had a stake, raised serious questions about the Church's connections with the mafia and Italian financial elites. Subsequent investigations revealed money laundering, dubious political financing, and the misuse of donations from the faithful. Recently, the financial scandal involving hundreds of millions of euros invested in a real estate project in London has led to several senior Vatican officials being put on trial. One of them is Cardinal Angelo Becciu, a former close aide to the Pope, who is accused of abusing his power and using Vatican funds for personal purposes. Although there has been no final verdict, this case is seen as a litmus test for Vatican's claims of transparency reform under Pope Francis. Vatican has also been criticized for its closed system, where crucial decisions are made by a very small group of male clergy without any democratic process. The lack of representation for women, the silence of many layers within the Church, and the culture of internal protection have left many theologians and believers disappointed, especially in the 21st century, when the demand for reform, transparency, and justice has grown stronger. Under Pope Francis's papacy, many doors that were once closed were opened. However, the resistance from conservative forces, the complex power structures, and the traditional nature of the Vatican have meant that every attempt at reform faces significant challenges. His death now marks not just the passing of a religious leader, but also the beginning of a pivotal moment. Either Vatican continues on the path of renewal and transparency, or it returns to a conservative path, where power is concealed behind centuries-old stone walls. Throughout Pope Francis's papacy, debates about the future direction of the Catholic Church took place not only outside, but also within the very heart of Vatican. With his strong reformist vision, Pope Francis pushed for a series of changes, from confronting social issues like climate change and inequality to internal reforms within the Church, such as expanding women's roles in leadership and promoting a church that is closer to the poor. However, these very reforms became the source of deep divisions between the conservative and progressive forces within the Church. While social and pastoral advancements were welcomed by many, a significant number of members within the Church, especially cardinals and bishops from countries with conservative traditions like Poland, Hungary, and several African nations, strongly opposed these changes. Some criticized that expanding women's rights or accepting social trends like same-sex marriage would weaken the Church's traditional teachings, creating a vague Catholic world that lacks a solid foundation. Pope Francis, despite facing significant obstacles in implementing wide-ranging reforms, remained steadfast in his philosophy of a church that is not only a religious institution, but also a tool for serving society. However, even with his clear efforts, he could not completely erase the old power structures that had existed in the Vatican for centuries. It remains a church with many hidden aspects, where power often lies in the hands of a few, particularly senior priests, who have a significant influence on shaping the direction of the Holy See. With the death of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church is entering an uncertain phase. The reforms he initiated may be reversed or even halted if a conservative pope succeeds him. One of the biggest challenges the Church will face is how to maintain the faith of its followers amidst ongoing internal debates about doctrine and the increasing scandals. To continue to survive and thrive in the modern world, the Vatican cannot rely solely on tradition and power, but must find ways to adapt to the inevitable changes in global society and culture. The question is whether the Holy See has the ability and commitment to truly reform, or if it will continue to protect conservative forces, maintaining a church that only exists in the past. The Vatican, with all its power and influence, now stands at a crucial crossroads. The departure of Pope Francis marks a significant shift in how the Church confronts global issues, ranging from ethics and finance to social matters. However, whether his legacy of reform will continue or be erased depends on his successor, and it could spark a major battle between factions within the Church. Regardless of the outcome, the story of the Vatican will always be filled with mysteries, ongoing controversies, and uncertain steps ahead. That's all about the strange, dark, and mysterious things that are said to be lurking within the walls of the Vatican. Do you feel that these are very real parts of the Vatican's history? Or do you think some of these things have been misunderstood due to public perception of this place? Maybe you know about another dark secret of the Vatican that we've missed. Be sure to let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out other intriguing things popping up on your screen. See you next time.